We are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to BioBridge, where we talk about how to connect Japan to the rest of the world in the life sciences. Um, 2 weeks passes by so fast. I don't know. I'm getting old just very quickly. It feels like days. And we're already having two more very interesting guests with us today. But before that, Ibrahim, how have the last 2 weeks been treating you?
Yeah, quick, just like you said. But coming up, I'm sad that I'll be missing bio, and I know you're excited
You
to be
should
joining
be.
bio next week.
Yes, we are. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit
Yep.
also somewhere along the way. But welcome to Michael and Yuko. Thank you for taking the time to share your expertise and your experience surrounding Japan and US and rest of the world collaborations. And I would say today is we're going to focus mostly on the latter half, I think, of drug development, mostly around the lines of late stage to commercial. That's kind of the focus for today. And so let's kick it off. We usually start our discussions about who you are. Who are we talking to? So Yuko or Michael, this is the time to feature your background, why you work with Japan, and what your company is all about. The
No,
floor is
beauty
yours.
and beauty and intelligence first. So you go, please.
Oh, no. Oh my gosh, Michael. All right. Thank you. Um, Yuko
You can count on me to embarrass you whenever I have the opportunity.
Yes. So I'm Yuko Terasawa. I'm based in Northern California, and I've been in the U.S. ever since seven. But I've been in the biotech and life science area my whole career. My background, I have a PhD in nutritional science and molecular biology. I started in the drug discovery space as a bench scientist, and over the years transitioned into more business development activities, and currently focused on bridging actually Japan and global. I felt that Japan has excellent research and innovations that we can uh, support growth of innovations out of Japan. So, in addition, I supported, global companies to enter Japan, both in therapeutics, but medtech in addition. So, in brief, that's my background. Thank you.
Fantastic, Michael.
Well, Yuko, you are being very modest. She has a significant experience beyond that. In fact, where Yuko and I met was in the cardiovascular side of things, where she was
Oh,
heading up a great deal of work that was being done in the uh, ion channel side of things and a number of other capabilities that were required by the contract research organization that we were working for at the time. So, my name is Michael Young, and I am a C-suite um, clinical and commercial consultant. Yuko and I work together with a company that we created called BioMedwoRx. And this is a company that's been around for almost 10 years now. And we work at the intersection of clinical strategy and commercialization. So the majority of the companies that we serve are companies that are have a defined platform, maybe even a well-defined uh, target product profile. However, in many cases, do not have requisite experience in the commercialization side of things. So we help with partnering, we help with fundraising, we get involved in making sure that the science and how they are going to come to market actually come together. Myself, I have a number of years' experience on the big pharma and in the biotech side of things, having the experience of launching 23 drugs here in the United States, Western Europe, and Asia Pac. And I have 7 years' experience on the contract research side of things with two very large global organizations, where I've been responsible for business development as well as for partnering and collaboration through alliance management. So today, we're here to talk a bit more about how Japan fits into this picture, and in collaboration with the BioBridge side of things, our goal is to make sure that some of this outstanding science that is resident in Japan is where we focused a great deal and trying to bring that to the rest of the world, in particular, getting people situated here in the United States.
That's amazing. Thank you very much. And what you were saying, how Yuko's being very uh, humble about her background. I was thinking, anytime we have two guests, maybe I'm going to have guest A introduce guest B and guest B introduce guest A. That's what I was thinking for the next time. But either way, I know you guys work together and you both have your individual things also. But I'm really looking forward to picking your brain on anything that has to do with Japan and outside of Japan, in the clinical realm and into the commercial realm. So let's start high level. Not necessarily going one way, just in general, companies that want to leave their own niche, their own comfort zone. U.S. company going to Japan, or Japanese company going to the U.S. or EU or anywhere. What's the most common mindset you see that is, I guess, negative, that causes trouble to these people who are trying to just leave for the first time out of their nest and trying to fly? let's start at something much higher level, to see where you take us.
Michael, would you like to start?
Sure, I'm happy to. I'll give the opening salvo here. So, first and foremost, we find that whether or not it's a trans-Pacific scenario where a U.S. company is trying to go to Japan, or Japan startups, and even some of the more established companies, as you well know, that in Japan there is a very old infrastructure of established companies who have operated almost purely in Japan, or certainly just in the Asia-Pac theater. And coming to the United States is a big step for them. Some of these companies are literally hundreds of years old. So I think that probably one of the first areas that we often notice is that despite the fact that they may have been in business for quite some time, there is a strong tradition and belief that the way in which they approach business in their own country is the way in which they want to ideally bring that to the new country. And I think that often is a place where problems get created, because I think certainly here in the United States, where we have a reputation for being, if you will, mavericks and cowboys, there are things that don't often fit, kind of the structure, for instance, that a lot of Japanese companies are looking for. So I think that's one realization that many of them have to undergo.
Yuko, do you have anything to add?
I think the cultural differences,
Mm-hmm.
business, how business is dealt in each country is different. So I think it's important to respect one another as they interact, and understand the differences, so that you don't have misunderstandings. And but in general, I think going cross-border either direction, each company should do research and understand, for instance, like competitive landscape, and how different maybe, for instance, like reimbursements are. There's various factors, so a lot of things to keep in consideration. But doing that research, I feel that's important.
Preparations.
Yeah.
Preparation.
Definitely, you know.
I would agree with that. I also would suggest to you that there's often a very real cultural difference in the amount of data that needs to be required. So you'll find that in the typical due diligence that's being done by many Western companies, it tends to be follow kind of a fairly simple look into the resource room, trying to understand what cost of goods and things of this nature might be. But we find that certainly with most Japanese companies, they are extremely interested in minute details. And so often there is a real requirement for US companies to be prepared to provide much more background and much more detail than they might be familiar with. And I think that while often you find with the Western companies that they don't feel that anybody could possibly use all of this information, I think that this is very, very commonly a situation that we see with Japanese firms who are looking to in-license or out-license. They are looking for often excruciating detail.
Indeed. I mean, I remember when I was running clinical studies back in the day, it was pretty well known that in Japan, the PMDA, even for an NDA, they would still be scrutinizing your animal data.
Yes. Yes.
Why would you need that now? So, but something
Exactly.
I heard you were talking about you go to another country, you have to keep an open mind, you have to be flexible, you have to understand what you're doing. Obviously, preparation is very important, but I always think this is not just in the life sciences or in business. I think it's really in life in general. And there's a saying in Japanese, if you love a child, let him or her see the world. I think that's really part of the way to shape a mind, to be able to accept that your way of doing is not necessarily the right way. You were talking about companies with hundreds of years of experience thinking that you can transplant that, or that is the way to do it, or even if they want to have an open mind, their past experience is their past experience. It's very difficult to say, well, I'm going to do it like this without knowing what this actually is. But I think the more you travel, the more you understand really that there can be very, very different cultures, which is kind of hard when you only know one culture. You kind of have this preconceived notion of right versus wrong, black versus white, this up versus down, front versus back. This binary way of thinking gets really molded into more of a spectrum for everything. There's very different ways and very different rights. Very to do
Yeah,
things.
absolutely. And while there are many stereotypes that go around the world about Asian companies as well as U.S. based companies, one of the classics is a matter of patience.
Mm.
Most of the Asian
Oh yeah.
companies tend to be extremely patient, very willing to always play the long game, and to
Yes.
understand that things may take quite some time, maybe even years to evolve. And most of the Western companies, in particular US companies, tend to be very impatient. And one of the things that Yuko and I have certainly seen and learned from negotiations, helping to manage and consult on the negotiations, be it back and forth, is a constant reminder to the American companies. I will tell them flat out, I'll say, once you've made a proposal about something, you need to be patient and waiting for the response, because there's going to be a lot of deliberation that's going to take place without you in the room. And it may be some time. And if you get too impatient and you speak first, I guarantee you will lose the deal. You're going to come out on the short end of things by trying to truncate things and make a fast decision. So I think you see that playing out on the world stage right now when it comes to the negotiations around what's happening in the world. An impatient leader can make a huge difference in the way in which the outcome comes out. So tradition has its role and its purpose.
Yes. Yes. Yuko, would you like to argue the other side?
I agree with Michael. Yeah.
Well, listen, I mean, obviously, it's everything in moderation, right? You have to be careful. You have to be detail oriented for certain things, and sometimes there's that window of opportunity. You have to jump in and catch it.
And you have to be
Every
you have to be respectful, Tetsu.
Mhm.
You must be respectful. That is a key pillar in any negotiations with Asia. A lack of respect and a lack of understanding, as you said, having an open mind to the process that is familiar, just gets you into trouble. It just always does.
Mhm.
Therefore, I believe that, working with teams that are familiar with each, business culture, and having strong connections to the right people that would be beneficial to the startup. I feel that's an important factor. Instead of just having the company founder try to do their outreach alone. They may not know the best partner. So having someone locally based that is familiar with the various companies and the interest and focus, I think that's a key point that Michael and we feel, just example, like a startup from Japan, we supported over the years because we have strong networks and connections to the pharma or biotech sector, knowing what the interests are of these companies in the U.S. or global. That's provides efficiencies and I think the key establishing those relationships, helping that relationships come together faster.
Yeah, and I would augment that by saying, it's important when you are trying to nurture these relationships that you be, as I pointed out, being respectful of the fact that you don't want to have the CEO of a Japanese firm putting them in the position of having to negotiate with somebody who does not have the same perceived role in the organization, and vice versa. I think it's very important that you not essentially insult the intelligence and the experience of either of the parties. Likewise, you don't want to have a situation where you're asking somebody who is in a functional management role in a Japanese firm to try and negotiate with somebody who is clearly above them in the opposite structure. So within the context of as a certified alliance professional, I can tell you that finding the correct matchups and being able to make sure that you're not asking for adjudication of contracts for which the other individual has no responsibility, it becomes a very important détente. So being respectful at the same time that you are moving the business forward is a key part of this.
How do you manage the mismatch that gets created for, when there's a startup that's trying to make a deal with a bigger company? There's usually never, there's not an equal level matchup that's available. For example, a CEO doesn't have access to the CEO of a big pharma.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that becomes a matter of education. And Yuko is excellent at helping people become more educated about this. So, while you might not in a multinational large pharma company who is dealing with us, maybe even beyond a startup, but a biotech or a biopharma company in Japan, just making sure that the skill sets and the level of the discussion are on a par can get you a lot farther than necessarily going to the top of the ladder every single time. Yuko,
No,
any other thoughts on that?
No, that's important to, um, yeah, I mean, the groups that would be involved in evaluating and the key people that would assess the interests and the technologies, it's important to find the key match.
But as you pointed out, Ibrahim, one of the problems is if you have a small infrastructure of only 10 or 12 people in a company in the smaller firm, regardless of which side it's on, sometimes it's a matter of getting the right kinds of people who have street credibility, if you will. It may be a group assembly that you've got to get together. They're going to have to be 2 or 3 people that represent the scientific and the medical legal and some of the other pieces of it. You might have to get them in the room at the same time that you're talking with one individual from the other company.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, I've definitely experienced that on my side as well. Yeah, often happens. I think another point, especially I think in Asian companies or firms, especially in Japan, it's much more process oriented, is what I saw. So you have to go through appropriate channels first, whereas in the US or the Western world, it's about kind of leapfrogging the front person, the front man, and going straight to, I think, management or the key decision makers. But it's not a preferable approach on the Asian side to go that way.
That's
Would
right.
you agree with that?
Yeah, that's right. Definitely.
Yeah, we agree with that. And oftentimes we're in a situation where we're dealing with a designated agent for a Japanese company. And it's classical that the American company wants to bypass that individual and just go on and get somebody inside. But the fact of the matter is that agent has been placed in that role by the Japanese firm for a reason. And you may not even know that reason, but you're going to disrupt and potentially, actually create a point of friction by trying to leapfrog, as you mentioned. Patience.
I'm so glad you talk about these points, which may seem trivial to the U.S. side. Like literally, just a few weeks ago, I had a friend who's the CEO of a small biotech. He said, "Wow, I've got a big pharma coming to visit us. Then they're going to come 3 members, the president of the department, and then a middle manager, and then a technical person." And I said, "Yeah, what you want to do is match ranks, match.
Right.
Don't go over in number, and don't mismatch the ranks." And earlier you were mentioning if you can't match the rank, if you at least acknowledge that you're trying to do that and right from the beginning say, "Oh, we're sorry, we couldn't match this person, but we brought another person instead." It's that intent, it's that understanding of the culture. I think that goes a long way. You're a small company, you can't do everything, and they understand that, but at least you're trying. So it's that understanding. That's open-mindedness. That's definitely important, rather than thinking, "Who cares? I'm going to go alone."
Yeah, no, I will share with you that when I was working for ASI here in the United States, there were great steps and pains taken to make sure that the American team that was here in the United States understood how they were going to interact. So I know it's both legendary as well as thought of as trivial sometimes, but even the act of sharing a business card teaches you a great deal about the way in which you need to do things. So, many companies that have never dealt with anybody in Japan don't understand the symbolism is not just ritual. It is actually intended to teach the way in which we will do business. So when you offer your business card, you offer it with both hands. This is a sign of respect that you are giving, that you are handing off your credentials. And when the person receives it, especially when you're receiving a card from a Japanese, you take the card with both hands and you look at it. Here in the United States, we often just flip a card over. Here's my business card. But when you receive that card, you actually look at it and you acknowledge that you've read it, because this is a sign of respect that you understand the role and the position and the experience of the individual who's giving it to you. And that is symbolic of the way in which you are going to do business with them. So I know it's a simple thing, but it's a lesson well worth learning.
The devil's in the details, especially in Japan and in Asia in general, I would say. But Japan, Korea, probably at a different level. China, the relationship aspect is still very, very important. Like who you know,
Right.
how do you get, communicate through who? All these things you have to learn. It's not just your technology. It's not just your science. Okay, well.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of curious, Tetsu, on that point. Here's a question for you: Is you're dealing?
That's a new one.
See, you're dealing a great deal with a number of different companies who are coming into essentially the consulting practice that you run. What are you finding with Gen Z, with the younger people? What are you finding? We interact with people from Korea. We get we're talking to a couple of K-poppers, and we're trying to understand exactly what they're interested in. Have you noticed any change?
So here's well, I guess most of my clients and my counterparts are not Gen Z. They're more like Gen X, like my level. They're higher ups in the companies. But yes, I do have a few clients and people I know in Japan, the key hub people who are Gen Zs, and I think it's a good thing. A lot of these guys, they're starting to sort of neglect the really traditionally, once upon a time thought as important things that they find today is only a time waster. They'll kind of put that aside and go, they'll talk to people in first names. In Japan, this is actually happening quite a bit more. People are calling, Tetsu or Ibrahim rather than Mian Sensei. These things, there's more and more of that, and obviously the use of technology, that talking through Zoom. This is actually quite impressive. It's all through the pandemic that it's really become very general, widespread to use all these online meetings. But before that, it wasn't that widespread in Japan. And you had to go to the sites for the visits all the time in Japan up to the pandemic. You take a flight to the site just to get a hanko, a stamp, and come back. That kind of stuff was still quite common. But through the pandemic, we now found out that culture can change if pressed, and all the sites, they're now accepting of these different processes. And the youngsters are the CRAs, the young kids. They're leading the way to make these changes. And the younger CEOs in Japan in the digital health, I think a lot of them are able to transform and take the lead on these different globalization initiatives.
Yeah, I don't necessarily find it a matter of them quote unquote westernizing, but I think that it's more pragmatic. It's just simply practical and it's technologically adept.
And if you really think historically, this is something could explain is that Japan has always been what they call nenko joretsu, which means the older you are, the higher you are in ranking, because the companies, it's not just performance. In fact, performance is actually only really a part of how you go up the ladder. And this was throughout the whole industrial age, like all the way through like the 90s when the bubble, burst. But the kids, the Gen Zs, they haven't really been able to enjoy the pre-bubble stages, right? So they don't know that you just grow older and you go higher up the ladder. They don't know that. They don't know, becoming rich just by virtue of being. They have to sort of make their way, plow their way through. So they're finding new ways to become more efficient, more effective in doing things. They're getting forced into it. And I think it's a good thing. They're all smart kids, and they're changing a lot of the traditions. I feel, and this is wonderful for Japan. And there's a lot of there's more foreigners coming into Japan. Now we won't get into the politics of it, but from a perspective of really stimulating and mixing and co-pollinate the cross pollination, all this I think is we're in a good and fun period where the smart kids, the hardworking kids will survive and lead the charge into something, who knows what's coming up, but it looks good to me.
I think the one thing I would add to that is, the word that comes to my mind is actually the Gen Z is kind of softening up a little bit. In terms of, even with patients, I see it where, the obstacle, the formalities are kind of softening a little bit. So the boundaries are softening, and then it's just becoming a little bit easier to talk more frankly. So I think overall it's a good thing.
I agree.
The struggle I have actually, having grown up in Japan, is that, how do you delineate the edge that Japan has from all these formalities and these structures and processes they've created, from so that being an edge versus an obstacle. Because it's all the detail orientation, I think, that's helped Japan advance in its own way. And, is it, if you go right or wrong, is it wrong for Japan to kind of change those factors in order to become more global? It's just a question I have. I don't think there's a good answer. I wonder.
Yeah, I think I'll just speak to the fact that there are definitive strengths among the clinical development and the certainly the pharmaceutical world in Japan. The quality of the research, the quality of the care that is given at the clinical sites is tremendously good. It's no surprise that it's exceptionally thorough. It is at the same time very expensive, but it is a situation where the value of the clinical research coming out of Japan is very, very high. The fact of the matter is that from a disease management state, there are certain diseases that are much more prevalent in Japan than they are in other parts of the world, and there are certain diseases which are virtually non-existent in Japan. So it's a very different ecosystem, and it does require, again, as Yuko brought up earlier, it takes understanding and research. Doing your homework. If you're going to be a U.S. company going there with a large primary care market opportunity, say diabetes or arthritis or something of this nature, that's a very different scenario that you're walking into, and it takes the education and the experience of in-country people who can work with you.
Well, it's a balance. Where do you draw the line? Extreme quality, which is what Japan used to always strive for, or the most efficient or the lowest cost. There's no right answer, and it's always a balance that you have to strike along the way. But you can always sort of know that Japan tends towards quality, whereas U.S. probably tends towards efficiency. Japan used to be, as Michael said, very expensive. When I was running clinical study in 2012, 13, around those days, it was the most expensive country in the world, exceeding the U.S. costs. But ever since, there's been virtually zero inflation in Japan, and then plus the yen has been devaluated so much that it's now very, very affordable for the same quality. So that's also a turning point, I think, for Japan in the past few years. That's really been attracting a lot of investments into Japan. Again, it's a great thing. It's hard for the Japanese companies coming out, but at least there's a lot of foreign capital and foreign interest going into Japan, and it's that flow. I think it's tremendous. So we've been talking. I think without explicitly saying it, we've been talking a lot about U.S. companies hitting the Japanese cultural wall. Let's go the other way because you guys bring in, you guys help Japanese companies come to the U.S. Um, what do you think Japanese companies lack, or they often miss this element when they come to the U.S. and they hit a wall? Um, is something for Yuko?
I, the quality of the science is great from a Japanese startup.
That's
But
not a problem.
yeah, that's not a problem. I think the storytelling,
Okay. Yes.
it's not the way that U.S. audience usually, hears the what's compelling about a technology. It doesn't come out immediately. That's,
Hmm.
I think, the challenge. In general, I would say many times Japanese startups tend to put so much information,
Yeah.
right? But
It's the flip
so
side of the detail oriented
yes,
culture.
so the key message kind of gets a little hidden, or it's
Yeah.
and it's not, also the ask is not upfront, or not easily understood by the U.S. audience. So that's an area, I would say, area to help improve, um,
Hmm.
help the Japanese startups understand, what is the typical, let's say, presentation deck for an investor or pharma company look like, what components is needed. So those kind of things, we've come across quite a few startups that um, need help to improve, and also the BD, business development process, or understanding investment, investor outreach. They may think that, oh, U.S. investors have a lot of funds. We'll just go talk to them. It's not so black and white. So I'll hand it to
But
Michael. Please input.
Yeah, I'll just amplify that a little bit more and simply tell you that one of the great hallmarks of most Japanese firms is an interest in keeping what they know close to the vest. There's not a great deal of interest in just simply being highly transparent, and that kind of approach often creates a complication with with really the need of U.S. investors and U.S. Licensor companies to it causes questions. It's always a matter of, well, what's the situation? Why do you not have any social media about what it is that you're investigating? Why is it that there's no corporate communications? Why is it that I don't see white papers about your technology? Why is it that I don't understand? How come you're not speaking at JPM? What are you not? All of these things cause questions, and these are unfortunately simply counterintuitive to the way in which most Japanese companies operate. So they're coming to you with a technical package, which in their minds often should explain why this is worth investing in or why you should be buying what we're selling. But in point of fact, most Japanese firms haven't even asked you to buy anything. They just simply have told you their story, and the reaction is, yeah, so what? So does that make sense to you? I mean, you've seen it time and time again.
That's why it's so funny.
Yeah, it just becomes a matter of understanding how people want to get their information, and to the degree that what they want to know. Of course, they want to understand the technology, but they always want to understand what's so good about this. Why should I be interested, and what's likely to be the longer term picture? That often never gets painted. Just like Yuko was saying, the storytelling isn't there. It's here's where we are today, so you should love this, as opposed to here's what we think this can be in 5 years, and that's really why you should love it.
Yeah,
So,
one of my favorite. Oh, it makes total sense. Well, one of my favorite courses that during my MBA is organizational behavior, and one of the concepts I learned in there is for communication is that Asian countries, well, certain countries, mostly Asian are like that, have what is called a high context communication style, whereas Western, especially US, have a very low context communication style. And what that simply means is that in a low context communication style, we feel that the messenger or the person transmitting the message has the responsibility of the message getting understood. So we'll take a lot of time to craft the message and lead the receptor or the recipient to understand the message. Whereas a high context uh, communication style like that is in Japan and Korea, uh, their way is I'll give you a lot of information. You draw the conclusion out of what I have, and that's like a boss saying, do I have to spell everything out for you? So the subordinate always, one message that comes down, the subordinate needs to prepare 3 versions of the message to make sure that he's able to answer to his boss's true request. And so that's how Japanese, I think, developed this culture of being able to see a lot of the context without you saying something. You go into a restaurant, the server will always know when your glass is, going to half full or half empty. It'll come before you even ask. That's it's great in personal relationships. You feel very appreciated, but in a business relationship, it's not efficient. And that's where I think a lot of the friction comes with Western cultures. If both are like that, you understand. If both are transactional, you understand. So all this makes total sense. And like Yuko was saying, if you prepare, this, you understand. Oh, the other person's communication style is like this. Then you won't take it. Not only will you have an open mind to it, but at least you won't take certain messages negatively. Like the Japanese often feel like the Western person is not being considerate. I've been preparing all these, subliminal messages for you to understand, but you're not, responding in kind. Is there a bad strategy behind there that I need to be worried about? That this kind of thing just plays in your psychology. And again, it's not just business; it's everywhere. But yeah, it shows up. This is so much fun, though. I'm talking about this stuff. It's not science. It's not technology. It's really the people's communication styles that's causing it. A lot of these inefficiencies.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You mentioned the pitch decks and whatnot. It kind of shows in the importance of the relationship that gets put forward. Like upfront, a pitch deck from Japan would often have the company size, company profile, or the personal profile first, and then they'll start with the pitch. Versus
yes,
Western is opposite. It's the problem first, and then in the end, we'll say like, this is our team. So it kind of emphasizes different parts, and it shows it's a cultural thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true, and I think that the Western approach or the American approach is typically you're going to have 30 seconds to 1 minute to get your point across, and that's it. Whereas in most Japanese cultural settings, they're going to be patient and give you as much time as necessary to build trust, to build confidence, and to understand the entire picture. So that those two contexts as you pointed out, Tetsu, is they're really counterintuitive.
Indeed. That's that. So we've covered both, U.S. to Japan, Japan to U.S. Let's try to compare. If we talk to a U.S. company or a Japanese company that wants to go to the other side, um, I think oftentimes we say try to prepare and have this lead time of preparation. What is an adequate preparation or lead time if you're going from the U.S. to Japan or from Japan to U.S. or it's the same or it depends on phase? Well, what are your thoughts on when do you actually start to prepare for your expansion to the other country, to the other market?
Um, wait, should I start, Michael?
Yeah, no, go for it.
I think every startup, could be at different state. Every company, their product or development could be at different stages, right? But definitely, for instance, going into Japan. Let's say a U.S. company going to Japan, they have to realize it's the relationship building actually takes much long. It's a longer time frame than don't expect 1 year to actually secure a partnership. It doesn't happen that immediately, especially for like more advanced products or development. Let's say if it's a therapeutic, it's a relationship building that happens, and before.
My goodness.
If it's a small research collaboration, maybe pilots could happen, but if it's to secure a long-term partnership, it doesn't happen very quickly. It may take a few years or more.
So you're saying the other way from Japan to the U.S. is much faster?
I would say in general, but
In general, okay. So there is
more,
a difference.
in compared to, I would say compared to global to Japan, relatively.
Yeah, I would add.
The language.
Yeah, I would add to that any global company that is not thinking about going to Japan needs to really rethink that. It has classically had many complications, if you will. It almost has been inhospitable to external development coming into Japan, but that's no longer the case. I think Japan is well recognized as one of the top technology and pharmaceutical markets in the world. I think that's true of not only drugs, but certainly diagnostics and devices. I think the second thing about that is also to understand that the population of Japan is a highly, highly marketable population. First of all, the longevity of most Japanese residents is such that you have a huge window in which to gain commercial advantage over time. The interest in everything from oncology to dermatology is very, very high among the population. There's a great premium put on good health and longevity in Japan. So you really need to think about it. The government itself has also become much more amenable to expediting review and approval and pricing of medications. So it's definitely a desirable market, and I think that there are a lot of companies that get in development that don't think about going to Japan, and they should be reconsidering that. Likewise,
they have it somewhere, but they're just pushing it back. Like, oh, okay, we'll think about Japan when we get to our first patient in or whatever, thinking that it could be very fast. Then Yuko's advice on you. You got to calculate that lead time. Right.
So starting early. It's never too early to begin relationships. I think we talked earlier about, what's the appropriate time to take a possible product or technology there. I think once you have established that you have a product that could be beneficial in that market, that's not too early. It's a good time to begin a conversation, so that you have an idea of how long it's going to take you to cultivate the necessary pathway to go and get there. I think the other thing too is to recognize that there are important steps in looking at both patent, IP pieces of this, as well as to understand what the regulatory pathway is going to be. So it doesn't take a lot of effort, but you've got to put some effort into it.
Definitely a quick landscape scan. It's not very expensive. Put in a few $1,000, maybe fly to Japan, go to Bio Japan. Much cheaper than Bio International in terms of cost as a trip.
Sure.
Go there, breathe the Japanese air, meet the Japanese people, feel the Japanese atmosphere.
With an open mind. With an open mind.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
You're gonna absorb
Exactly.
so much more, quickly, and get a grasp. And perhaps you'll go in there and go, well, actually, I don't want to go to Japan, which could be a good conclusion still, if that's how you see it. But at least you'll get that answer quickly. And what Yuko was saying earlier, you'll meet people and then you'll have some relationships and you'll quickly learn. Oh, some things take more time. They're not answering your emails. Is that negative, or have they seen it? Have they forgotten? There's all these things that pop up in your mind, and you have to get used to that. So yes, absolutely, totally agree with all your assessments. And will you look at the time? It seems like we've only covered the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg. We can probably go on for another 3 hours, but let's finish off our discussion with forward-looking. With a forward-looking question, we always like to finish off. You've mentioned some trends. You've mentioned why we need to go to Japan. So what's the future for us? By 2030, 2031, what are we looking at in terms of the Japan-U.S. relationships, the Japan-global relationships? So what's the Japan ecosystem going to be like by then? Anything you like, but what do you see in the future, the bright future?
Yuko, you look into the crystal ball. You tell
them. I think right now, Japanese government is trying to put a lot of effort in the startup ecosystem.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Building, and I think something to realize that every ecosystem is unique. It's not. No one can expect, Japan's ecosystem to look like Silicon Valley, and vice versa. So it's unique, the differences, but the positives, it's. But everyone should try. I think, these startups. There's so much excellent innovations in Japan. And the way we can help, globally, let's say sharing knowledge, what we've done here in the US, but helping Japanese startups to how to help them grow to the US market, bringing their innovations. I think we can, from the US side, we can help them, right, to navigate new markets and such. So I hope that Japanese startups reach out and try to gain help, because there's a lot of interesting innovations that could benefit patients globally. So yeah, Michael, please.
Sure. So my view of this is more global. I'm looking at what Japan needs to do to become competitive globally, and recognizing that if they are stuck in old ways, there is no doubt about it. Even countries like the U.S. are now acknowledging that companies in China, for instance, are accelerating things dramatically. Japan does not want to be left behind. They continue to be one of the world's largest pharmaceutical markets, and in order to maintain that level of stature, they're going to need to accelerate what they're doing. And I think that's one of the reasons why the government has become much more amenable to the startup environment. The second thing is that the world is getting smaller, and so the reality is the advent of AI is changing everything. And so the what you're seeing is the acceleration of both the development time cycles. We're seeing this significantly. We do a lot of work in clinical software development with development companies in that area, and the life cycles of these are becoming so much shorter. And so Japanese innovators are aware of this. And so as the world gets smaller and there's more consolidation of things such as the ICH guidelines that are now being looked at, you're seeing parts of the world that are standardizing on and homogenizing on everything that is being used globally. So what I see in the future is a global drug development standard that Japan is going to want to, be a part of this, and that's just going to make the world that much smaller.
I love that. I love that. And do you think you see that happening by 2030, 2031?
Yeah, I think by 2030, I think we're going to be looking at a very, very different world. Why is that? Because it will no longer involve as many people as it currently does, because the robots are going to be talking to the other robots, and they already have a common language.
Wow, I'm going to dig up this video in 5 years' time and see where we are. This is amazing. Yes.
It'd be like Michael said 5 years ago.
Yeah, but you guys can see it coming, can't you? It's basically
in that sense, but I now that you said it, it makes total sense. I have asked FDA, during these public seminars, I asked them, how are you using AI right now? I'm assuming you're using AI to, do the pre-reviews of all the packages coming in. But what else are you doing, to harmonize, with certain countries? I have sort of touched upon that, but really, like a global standard, I guess that was the next step. But I haven't really thought about it realistically, and that's it's fun to hear about it. It's ambitious, but I definitely hope you're right.
Yeah. Well, again, as I'm saying, these timetables are shortening and shortening every day. I mean, the AI that you use today will not be the AI that you use tomorrow. Why is that? Principally because it's teaching itself, and you're looking at a scenario where protocols and processes that we are using for the design of clinical trials, the recruitment of patients, the use of or non-use of animals in testing in the future, where we end up going with in silico development, everything is just speeding up so quickly that's where the efficiencies of AI that we are using today, because that's largely what we use it for, is to try to become more efficient, will transition to AI really being more agentic, and those agents are the ones who are going to accelerate and improve both the accuracy and the completeness of what's going on. So we're rapidly achieving a point of application here. It's no longer just a concept about AI. It is the application of AI in actually doing the work for us. So hopefully the future for the four of us on this call, is no longer to worry about those processes, but is in point of fact to be thinking about using the one thing that differentiates human beings from machines, and that is imagination. We have imagination, and we must imagine what the future is going to be, and let the robots do the repeatable solutions. Let them deal with the protocols.
And don't forget the
We're another 30 minutes. Ibrahim, you were saying?
Yeah, I was saying, don't forget the relationships. Humans are social.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you let
Yes.
you let AI take care of the processes. The humans will take care of the relationships.
Exactly, and that is
Yes,
why.
relationships are getting
That is
more
why.
important.
Yeah, that is why you hear the phrase "humans in the loop." Humans. That is the value of humans in the loop, is to always remain in the position of building the relationships, coming up with the imagination of what is needed.
My goodness, I can't get over this. But Japan, it's trying to change. Running clinical studies in Japan used to be lots of visits. I mean, it's still more than the U.S. It's 100% SDVs and things like that. But they're trying to change.
Yeah.
Especially these global CROs that have the U.S. counterparts to teach them how to change, standardize to the global system.
Nobody's doing 100%
all the-
SDV anymore. Nobody, but you don't have to go too far into the woods to find people who are still using paper and Excel to run the projects.
All right. This has been absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for a very enriching discussion. Where can we find you guys if people have questions?
Well, for myself, you're welcome to come to LinkedIn and find me on LinkedIn. That's a great place for us to interact. We're very open to that on behalf of BioMedWorks. We are very open to helping solve problems and answer questions. So we look forward to collaborating with you two gentlemen in the future as well. And should you get a response to this that says, hey, we want more of this, Yuko and I would be pleased to sit down and have another evening with you.
Yes.
Fantastic.
No, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Ibrahim.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Be well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye-bye.